Good morning. I want to thank Dan and Greg. Again, the partnership that we share, the connection to economic development, the intersection that we have with transportation and economic development in this state is a well-beaten path, and it's really an incredible partnership when not only the local chambers but the statewide chamber really understand the importance of the combination of the business sector and government coming together to do things that make good common sense, to make the investments that are necessary to promote the state and to promote the prosperity, the future prosperity of the citizens of this state. It's critically important. And to Greg Smith, who chairs our commission, I'd like to say thank you and recognize that structure itself, the structure where six members of the public volunteer their time, and I want to say that they volunteer extraordinary hours to the work that we do to help guide our efforts in the department itself and to connect us to the public that we serve. I think it's a critical function, and it's a really wise structure that was created decades ago in this state to have that connection, to have the leadership connection that goes directly into the business community, into the communities we serve. And again, you know, we have 6 members, 5 at present, but they give hundreds of hours of their personal time away from family, away from business interests to help a very important issue. And it's really benefits me personally, it benefits our entire organization, and it benefits the state of Missouri. So I want to thank the chairman and the rest of the commission members for their service. One of the things we've done in the last several months, as we've gone around and talked to a lot of people in the state, it really strikes me just how misunderstood transportation is as a policy issue. The funding surrounding transportation, the way that those investments are deployed, how funding is allocated, what the current conditions of our infrastructure are, how much individuals pay for that, and really what the ramifications of the condition of our current infrastructure are. So we challenged ourselves several months ago to really look hard at that. Not so much as a desire to have an ask. We're not making a specific ask in this regard. The intention is solely to inform and educate and help inform the public policy debate that, quite frankly, when it is misinformed, we end up with results that do not solve the problems that are at hand. Problems that are, quite frankly, quite obvious to all of us in the room who are transportation advocates or represent business interests that understand the connection between the investments that we make and otherwise. So what we did is we put together a Citizens Guide to Transportation Funding. We've been bringing that out and rolling that out to the legislature, kind of a soft roll, if you will. But what I wanted to do is take you through some of the concepts in that Citizens Guide today, and also to further in that effort, what we've also done is we've looked at what are the results of the department over the past decade. It's one of the things we've been looking at so that, again, to inform the policy debate. As Chairman Smith mentioned, I am truly honored to represent what I truly believe is one of the finest DOTs in the country. Dedicated public servants all over this state, performing valuable public service, keeping people safe and trying to make sure that transportation is reliable as possible and as safe as possible with the resources that we have. And in that vein, we've gathered some information about the results over the past decade, and we want to share some of those with you as well. So what it comes down to is to put in context where we stand, and I think these numbers are well known by folks, but it's important to understand the resource availability to the department in context in this country. We have the 7th largest transportation network in the country at nearly 34,000 miles of road and 10,400 bridges, yet we're funded at 47th in the nation. 47th ranking on funding. Is it any wonder that there would be some condition deficits out there? It's really extraordinary to put that in context. You know, understanding that on a regional basis is important as well. We have, on a revenue per mile basis across all sources of revenue, Missouri DOT is funded at approximately $50,000 a mile. Now that sounds like a lot of money, of course it is. The national average is $216,000 a mile. And if you want to compare regionally, Iowa, who most recently raised their gas tax by 10 cents, is funded at $149,000 a mile, 3 times the resources per mile of Missouri. That regional difference will lead to differences in the economies of both states. That's not a trend that's positive for Missouri, and it is something that needs to be fixed. You know, you take it to the opposite spectrum. The highest revenue per mile state in the country is New Jersey, $1.7 million per mile, compared to $50,000 per mile here in Missouri. I think that's stunning. I'm not advocating for that level of funding. Somewhere in between would be nice. Something approaching the national average would be appropriate. And that's the type of investment, type of discussion we have to have. If we're going to have a world-class transportation network, we actually have to pay for it. That's shocking, isn't it? I'm not suggesting that we have to borrow into the future to do it. I'm not suggesting that there are other means to do it. We actually have to pay for it. That's the big secret in public policy over the last 30 years, right? Nationwide, with $20 trillion of debt. We've been convincing ourselves that the services that are necessary don't need to be paid for. We borrow from our children. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And it's really unfortunate that that's the situation we're in. So how does it all play out? I think it's very important to understand when we're talking about public policy to start with the facts. How much money is available for transportation investment in Missouri today? So in 2016, our most recent fiscal year, there was approximately $2.5 billion available for transportation on a statewide basis. This does not mean your local transportation development taxes or otherwise, but this is revenue generated at the statewide basis, $2.5 billion. It's a lot of money. Certainly it is. So again, what I normally hear when I talk about that is everyone in the room generally says, well, fix my road. You know, just get my road fixed. You've got $2.5 billion. Where does that money come from? The majority of it, $1.5 billion, comes from user fees generated at the state level. Those user fees are primarily the gas tax, license and registration charges for your vehicles, and sales tax on motor vehicles. Those are the 4 primary sources, $1.5 billion out of that $2.5 billion. $900 million are reimbursements for eligible construction from the federal government. That's on a reimbursable basis. The federal government does not back up a pickup truck with cash and drop it off that we draw down from. We actually seek reimbursement on generally a 4-to-1 match basis after we pay for construction. We pay a private contractor for construction. They send us an invoice. For each dollar that's federally eligible, we send that to the federal government, and they send us back 80 cents on the reimbursement, totaled up to $900 million. That is far and away the primary source of revenue for our construction program in this state. It comes from reimbursements from the federal government, primarily matched at the state level. And you see that little tiny gold circle there off to the right, that's general revenue. $18 million in 2016 of general revenue for transportation purposes statewide came to the Department of Transportation. And that is a key element because so many people in the state believe that when they pay their property tax or sales tax or income tax, they're funding transportation. You know, we hear it a lot. I pay my taxes, fix my road. Work on the bridge in my community, do these things. Well, the taxes that we talk about are user fees for transportation. It's not general taxation in this state. That's a key element for discussion and for understanding. And I believe that the public is not well informed on this, and it's certainly our task and our job to help inform that. So how's that money used? Frequently, we think of, and this happens a lot when we have discussions, and early on when I got here, discussions with the construction community we have a fantastic construction industry in this state, consultant engineers in this state that we partner with to execute the program that we put out there. But when you think of, $2 billion revenue, and then you look at the contract awards that go out, and we're in the $700 to $800 million range, the big question is, where's the rest of the money? Is it somehow that the department, through administrative excess, is wasting the money? That if that's the only thing you consider, if that's the only thing you consider in the discussion, it would seem that it's big government waste, that we are not drawing down this money into the construction program. Well, let me describe $1 billion right off the top that is not available at the discretion of the department. We have, through state law, revenue sharing of the user fees that goes to communities. Cities and counties receive $408 million of that $2.5 billion in 2016. Part of that's on the federal share through sub-allocated funds that go to the metropolitan planning organizations in our major urban centers, and the rest is directly sent by the Department of Revenue to the cities and counties. $250 million by the state budget for decades now goes to other agencies, primarily our partners in the Highway Patrol. $230 million in 2016 to pay for the enforcement of motor vehicle laws out on our roadways, keeping us safe. The other $20 million there is the collection cost for the Department of Revenue. They have to fund their operations, they collect all these user fees, and they get that collection cost. And the other is debt repayment. You see $280 million there. That is the state of Missouri, the Department of Transportation, borrowed money from 2000 to 2010, approximately $4 billion. That $4 billion advanced the conditions of the infrastructure in the state. Prior to that borrowing, we had a primary system of roads, the interstates and our other primary roads, that were only 40% considered in good condition. Today we enjoy nearly a 90% good condition, smooth road surface condition of the primary system. It cost money to do that. The advancement of debt enabled us to enjoy that condition improvement. Over 800 bridges were fixed with that debt as well. But today, it is not at our discretion not to pay back that debt. And that's simply the representation of the amount of debt there. So there's $1 billion right off the top of that amount of money. So what are we left with? $1.5 billion. Investments in roads and bridges, $1.4 billion. Other modes of transportation, $100 million. And all of the general revenue that comes into the state helps match the federal programs, FAA, transit, rail, and ports in this multimodal bucket. Small investment that we make on a statewide basis for a very impactful part of our infrastructure that's extremely important. We can never forget that those investments are every bit as critical as investments in our roads and bridges for the economic vitality of this state. So how do we break down that road and bridge investment? We start at the base. So consider that bucket, that $1.4 billion, and I'm just extending this out over a 15-year period for you. It costs money to operate and maintain 34,000 miles of roads. That is our operating cost right there across a 15-year horizon. This is a shock, I would think, to most people. When I looked at this, as a shock to me. How many agencies in government have a flat line operating cost over the last 15 years? That's the Department of Transportation. This is our maintenance cost and our fleet facilities and information systems. These are what provide services out on the roadways. It's our traffic operations. It's the ability to fight floods, fight ice storms, mow the right-of-way, pick up litter, do pothole work, and quite frankly, about $150, $160 million a year goes into maintenance, paving programs on our lowest volume roads throughout the state that do not get funded through our capital campaign. That also shows over this period of time, you see a little decline back in 2011. That's a 20% retrenchment by the Department of Transportation. During the worst economic times since the Great Depression, with the leadership of the Commission, the Department of Transportation looked inward to save and to consolidate operations. We went from 10 districts to 7. We closed and sold 124 maintenance facilities. We are 1,200 employees less than we were in 2011 today, and we sold over 750 pieces of heavy equipment. Those savings, which net out to more than $100 million a year, have been invested right there. The dark blue, there's your construction program. Every time we save money in operations, more money is available for the construction program. That's the way the highway fund, that's the way the road fund works. That capability, so that's savings, that closing the gap on growth in the operating budget has provided to date over $700 million toward the construction program in this state. Now, I will not stand here and tell you that that's sustainable. We can't hold flat forever. We have equipment that we have to buy. We have in our department 14% of the workforce at the Department of Transportation, 14% is eligible for public assistance. Let that sink in for a minute. I find that to be disgraceful. That's not sustainable, and it needs to be solved. These are public servants in harm's way providing services to your businesses and your communities, and they deserve every bit as much to be considered worthy of the investment of the transportation dollar, every bit as much as the roadways that we're working on. We have progress that we need to make here. But you can see we've had a pretty decided decline in available resources to invest in the infrastructure. And what you can also see is we're coming out of that decline. We are, as a department, we're deficit spending to do so. The federal government, with the passage of the FAST Act last year, provided some financial stability in this system that's critical for us as a department and for industry that we work with to be able to plan out the investments that are necessary and needed. We've come out of there, but you can see we're not fully out, and we're not at the level we were at just a decade ago. These investments are critical. This other piece is essentially the cost to deploy that construction program. That's engineering, right-of-way, utilities costs. It's engineering both internally at the department and with our partner consultant community. And this red line is where we were headed just a year ago. That would have been a devastating impact, and thank goodness, Federal Highway and our partners at USDOT and, quite frankly, the U.S. Congress passed the FAST Act, and it was signed by the President about a year and a half ago. That enabled us to come out of this period of instability and to take more risk at the state level, to deficit spend in the road fund to be able to match all of our federal funds, and to recognize the fact that we've got a little better outlook in terms of the core user fee revenues in the last couple years, and we've projected that trend to continue, and we're building that into our capital construction plan. So, you know, that's kind of the macro view of where we are. I think it's important when we're talking to taxpayers and we're talking to others to really recognize the fact that the investments that we make out there have an impact on individuals. So I thought it's important that we provide information so that an individual user of the transportation network could actually determine for themselves what they pay. You know, if you think about it, you know how much you paid for your income and property tax last year. How much did you pay in transportation taxes? You know, when you don't know, you might assume the worst. So what we've done is created a calculator online at MoDOT.org under our Citizens Guide tab, where you can go in and make that determination. Type in how many miles you drive, what your vehicle gets on miles per gallon, and we'll give you the federal, state, and local taxes and fees that are associated with transportation. All told, spread across 4.3 million licensed drivers in this state, we average about $30 a month. $30 a month for transportation taxes. That's not commercial, that's the local ones to the individual. And when you consider that $30 a month, I mean, I always and frequently say, you know, how much do you pay for network access here for your cell phone? How much do you pay for cable TV every month? How much do you pay for electricity? How relevant are those? All of them necessary in one sense or another, but how impactful are those to your daily life, to your business's future, to your ability to get here this morning, to get to family and friends this evening, to get groceries, medical services, all of those things? None are as impactful on your daily life as the transportation network. Yet, we fund this at a mere fraction of all those other network access points. And it's important, I think, to understand when you're doing that calculation to consider what's the impact of our current conditions. What does the condition of the infrastructure in Missouri today cost you, the individual? You know, $4.8 billion a year is the charge to Missourians for incidents on our transportation network. $4.8 billion. That's $93 a month for every licensed driver in this state. $93, 3 times what you pay into the transportation network on incidents alone. And while you may have been fortunate not to be in one of those incidents, you certainly pay for that in your insurance rates. It is a cost of our transportation network, and it's also a cost of our collective behavior using that network. Ed will talk about that in a little bit. But when you consider the cost of congestion, waiting in traffic, lost time, lost productivity, increased fuel costs, increased pollution, that averages $43 a month for the average Missourian. Obviously more in the urban centers than the rural, but it's costing us all because our freight system is tied up in that traffic as well. So the cost of goods that you purchase at the store go up as a result of that. Incidents and vehicle operating costs are also part of that. All told, we've calculated this to be nearly $170 a month to the average Missouri driver. So you're paying $30 a month into a system costing you $170. Does anybody see any room for policy movement there that might make some sense? I certainly do. You know, the user fees themselves have not kept pace with inflation over the last 20 years and beyond. Had we simply kept pace with inflation over this period of time, there'd be an additional $500 million of investment capital available to invest in this system. So just briefly, one of the things we've done in the last couple months is looked at what type of results are you receiving from your Department of Transportation. You know, a lot of times, you know, this is hard for a DOT to do because we're a very yeoman-like organization. You do one project, you move to the next, right? We don't sit back and celebrate. We don't really spend a lot of time with this. But I think when we're talking about the relative competence of the organization, and that is part of the policy debate, I think it's important to have this discussion. So we went back and looked at things. We categorized them in 3 ways: accountability, innovation, and efficiency. I'll give you a little bit of a flavor here. So this is similar to the last map that we had up. 7th in the nation in terms of size of the system, 47th in funding, but ranked 12th. 12th in highway performance and cost effectiveness. How's that possible? How's that possible? It's possible because of a lot of hard work, a lot of innovation, a lot of efficiency measures, and daily attention to details. You know, so since 2007, and when everybody starts challenging these, understand that we've got this nailed. If we couldn't document it, it's not in this discussion. Since 2007, we have documented $4.5 billion of savings, one time or ongoing, across this entire network. Let me give you an example of that. So we measure performance on hundreds of areas, and that's a surprise to a lot of people. We've worked with Federal Highway. We're one of the national leaders in performance measurement. That's a lot of good hard work and great leadership from generations of leaders at MoDOT came before me. Since this time, we've completed 4,661 construction projects with an original estimate of $13.6 billion. The completed cost came in $925 million below that, nearly $1 billion of savings on construction projects alone. That's 7% under budget over the entire construction program over an entire decade, and 94% of those projects came in on time or early. That is amazing work by our construction industry, and that is amazing work by the Department of Transportation. That $1 billion got pumped right back into the program. And across hundreds of areas, there are additional savings that add up to this $4.5 billion. In fact, you know, it includes essentially $400 million a year of efficiency, and on top of that, over $600 million of benefits to the customers, the people that use the system. Over that period of time, $3.7 billion of incidents have been avoided, primarily through improvements to our intersections and safety measures throughout the network itself. $3.7 billion, just on that alone. The department has really taken on efficiency and innovation as a cultural aspect. The Federal Highway Administration did a great thing a number of years ago with a program called Everyday Counts, and it was to encourage agencies throughout the country to share their great ideas with each other. There have been 50 nationwide adopted Everyday Counts standards. The Department of Transportation has adopted 49 of 50. And the only one that we haven't adopted violates state law. So we haven't adopted it for that purpose. We're working on that. So from an accountability standpoint, taking care of the system, safety improvements, economic development, investing in economic growth. We have $5.4 million in annual customer savings and nearly $50 million in total customer savings. From an innovation standpoint, building that culture of best practices. You know, we're a national leader, as I mentioned, in Everyday Counts. State-of-the-art design concepts that are saving great money. We have an innovations challenge that we do statewide, and we've incorporated over 200 ideas into our maintenance operations to save money and to be more safe. And we're one of the national leaders in using recycled materials. From an efficiency standpoint, cost savings, we look at one thing that's been done, well over $1 billion of savings in the last decade, practical design. In fact, that practical design is now a national standard. It's one that was created here in Missouri. Practical operations, where we focus on customer priorities. We see nearly $400 million a year in savings. Innovative finance, we've brought in over $1 billion of additional resources into this state over that decade. And procurement methods, contracting, innovations there, all of which have saved money. That's why, with a system funded 47th, we're ranked in the low teens overall. But what do we need? What are the needs in this system going forward? You know, right here you see over $800 million of additional needs. We've calculated this above the level of funding that we have. And in order that we've heard from Missourians, from legislators, from others, first take care of the system. we see about $170 million a year to be able to take care of the existing system. Second, keep all travelers safe, no matter what mode of transportation. Invest in projects that spur economic growth, nearly $300 million a year, and reinvest in our major interstates and primary road system, nearly $300 million a year. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of investment. What would that look like? So we look at that 15-year chart. All of that stacked up together brings us certainly above the level of investment that we had a decade ago, but not that far above that. And if you consider just on a public policy basis, had we just kept pace with inflation over that period of time, another $500 million would be available. We'd be taking care of most of the unfunded needs in this state, just by keeping pace with inflation, not growing the size of government, but having purchasing power equivalent of what we had 20 years ago. So what does that cost? What would that cost in those buckets? Literally, taking care of the existing system, another $3 a month per licensed driver. Economic development projects, just over $5 a month. Reconstruction of our interstate system, just under $6 a month. Additional modal options and investments there, just about $1 a month. When you break it down, that $30 a month that we spend in this state, on average per driver, here's the way it breaks down. You spend $1 a month on administration at the department. You spend $10 a month with our maintenance and operations group. $15 a month goes into the construction program, and about $3 a month goes into debt service. That's the way it breaks out. So you stack this up, another $15 or $16 a month, takes care of the entire existing system, creates the type of economic development and improvements of safety that we all talk about, we all want to get to. This is solvable. It's not as complicated as it's been laid out. And quite frankly, adjustments in our base user fees would get us a long way toward this goal. When we talk about the partnership between the Department of Transportation, investments in economic development, and the partnership with the Chamber, we feel that we line up these 4 primary goals of taking care of the system right down through better mobility choices, line up very well and fit nicely together with the Missouri 2030 plan that the Chamber has laid out. That's a path forward that I think we fit into nicely, and working together to solve those problems, to answer those questions, and to inform and educate not only our population, but our policymakers. That's the key element of our day. And we are ready and able to put any further investment right into this system for the benefit of all Missourians. It's really such an important part of public policy, and it has ripple effects throughout our economy. It's something we can't deny, nor can we not face up to. We simply can't put our heads in the sand and ignore this issue. The investments that would be made would be investments in the future and the prosperity of the state itself. I know I'm running a little long, but if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer any questions as well. So I answered all of your questions early on. Not a sole question on transportation, funding, and otherwise. I guess we hit the presentation just right.
There are microphones if anybody has any questions for Patrick.
Quiet crowd. Did everybody see the coffee in the back of the room when they came in? Great.
Take your time.
Yeah. Yep, we've got one right
Michael.
here too.
May want to make sure those mics are on. Michael, shout it out.
All right. Patrick, thanks for giving us that insight. It really helps us understand what you all are dealing with on a daily basis. My question, obviously, as you know, is going to be geared towards ports. Where do you see the future of inland ports, and how do we need to connect from your department's mindset with other coastal ports? What do we need to do to make sure that you all have the necessary components in place to not just provide additional sources for multimodal, but really connect our inland ports in Missouri to other states as well as coastal ports?
That's a great question, thank you. So the investment in ports, I think we've recognized as a Department of Transportation and with the Port Association, have really recognized in the last couple of years. We've actually requested and had funded in original budgets nearly a tripling of resources, not a significant amount in the scheme of things, but we'd gotten to the point of about $12.4 million of budgetary resources available. Through the ports are funded through general revenue and through withholds and balancing the budget. That's actually back down to what we had been spending, which is about $4 million a year. So a little disappointed there. But I think the main thing is to continue to make the discussion. I think the ports have done a great job of working collaboratively together. I really don't see it as a competitive, when one port succeeds, others also succeed. And the association has done a great job of looking out over a multi-year basis to identify the investments that are needed to increase that competitiveness. And what I'll say is that they've gathered a list of investments that are not unreasonable, that total up over the 5-year period of about $84 million. And you know, when we look at this and say we're funding this at about $4 million a year, that's not a 5-year plan, it's a 20-year plan. It's a 21-year plan. And that's unacceptable because what is happening and what the needs of an expanding population all over this planet make perfectly evident is that the competitive advantage that we have here in Missouri with our agricultural products and with other freight movement products is that we need all available abilities to move freight efficiently and to be competitive worldwide. There is a projection that we'll need to double the entire food output for this planet over the next 50 years. So we've had 10,000 years of human existence and we've got to this level, and in the next 50 years, the challenge, a very significant human challenge, is to double that production. Missouri is perfectly positioned to be part of that. And if we do not get those products to the international markets as efficiently or more so than others, we'll lose that case. Commodities themselves, the pricing of the commodities determine whether or not you're competitive internationally, and the transport of those commodities is a big part of that cost. We've got to do the types of investments all over the state, but certainly our ability to move freight, slow movement, but very good cost, when we can put grains and other bulk products on barges. We take thousands of commercial trucks off the roadway. It takes pressure off the roadway. It expands the competitiveness of our agricultural community, and it's really a no-brainer. Additional investment in this regard, I think, is the single best thing we can do, but also working with other states and the surrounding areas, working with the ports up and down the Mississippi, so that we can get our products not only through here but out and into the international markets. That's the key.
Yes, Patrick, just to emphasize your point on that, the Port of Kansas City had its first full year of waterborne commerce in 2016. We moved a little over 45,000 tons of freight, which originally was sourced out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we had trucks leaving the Kansas City area, going down to Tulsa, coming back, approximately a 500-mile trip. That 45,000 tons took over 1 million truck miles off the roads, which is not insignificant.
Not insignificant at all. It's a great success story there.
Patrick, good morning.
Good morning.
Bruce Wiley, ACEC, Missouri. Congratulations on your Citizens Guide to Transportation funding. I think the key word in your title is funding. And with this great story that you put together, this great nonfiction novel, what Missouri is faced with, how is this message resonating in the executive and legislative branches so far?
It's a good question. You know, it was our intention, nothing other than to inform and educate, and I think that it's being well received for that very reason. And in fact, we've worked this through pretty much all of the legislature now, and what we're finding is that many members of the legislature are asking for additional copies so that they can bring it back home to their districts. It helps them who are vexed by this problem itself. It helps them answer some of the basic questions, particularly when it comes to that. You know, think about it. That basic question of concern. You know, we live in you know, unfortunately, a period of time when there's a lot of suspicion and consternation about public policy. And some of it's deserved because these are complicated issues and we've not found a good way to communicate. But if you really believed that because with $2.5 billion coming in a construction program of $800 million, if you believe that must be administrative excess, then it fits the bill that, well, we're not going to do any more funding until we solve that, until we make ourselves more efficient. The Department of Transportation is ranked second in the nation by the Reason Foundation in terms of the lowest administrative costs in the country for DOTs, Missouri DOT. We take this stuff really seriously. You're sitting right there with one of the finest chief financial officers of any DOT in the country, Roberta Breaker, has 17 years running of unqualified audit opinions, being a good steward of the resources that are provided to the Department of Transportation. And just knowing that communities receive $400 million of the user fees. That's important. That's not money at our discretion. Knowing that other agencies receive some of that through the budget and that there are debt service pieces. That $1 billion off the top is non-discretionary. That was not known. And I believe that's becoming better known so that it's removing one of the elements of doubt and a very significant one that until we remove that element of doubt, certainly nobody wants to increase investment here. Thank you.
Mr. McKenna, Charlie Nemrich here from the University of Missouri. Thanks for your presentation. I just wanted to reflect to you, Mr. Hassinger talked to one of our classes, and he asked them to use the mileage calculator and tell us what they got. And I said to the students, well, when you're doing that, tell us also how much you spend monthly on your cell phone.
That's right.
And the calculator costs at about $12 a student pays a month in transportation.
That's right.
And the average is about $60 a month, or 5 times more for the cell phone. I go to another meeting the next day and I find out that it's the last mile cost in logistics, and that's the big issue. And they keep driving that up higher and higher, and it's all transportation related. Not a penny of it which comes to the Department of Transportation. How can this information, is this the kind of stuff that you need to leverage to get your discussions to the people much better?
Well, absolutely. I think, you know, putting the relative cost for, you know, because this is really, it's network access and use. That's what it is. It's no different than the electric grid. It's no different than the cellular network. You know, and you take that, it helps put in context. Until we define this and put in context how much you pay. I think people think they pay significantly more for transportation. And, you know, quite frankly, when you think about the impact to your own personal budget, I would think that you'd be actually quite pleased with the return that you're getting on that value. I mean, I happen to have 3 teenage kids, so I pay for 5 of these in the family myself, aside from the one that I have for work that you all pay for me, but 5 of these. So I pay 12 times a month in cellular service compared to what I pay for transportation. You know, I'd like to say I do all that willingly, but you know, if any of you have teenagers, you don't do anything willingly. The simple fact of the matter is, we, quite frankly, pay more for our cup of coffee every morning than we do for transportation. It's stunning. When you look at other facts, so everything costs a lot of money, right? Well, we just had a really kind of a historic ice storm. Some people might think it was less ice than others, but we had in many places of the state over a half an inch of ice in the middle of January. The Department of Transportation put out 100,000 man hours or person hours of labor during that storm and 40,000 tons of salt, chlorides or treatments. That bill approximates $8 million. Unbelievable, right? Ton of money. That's unbelievable. Cost each of you about $1.75 individually. I went out and bought a bag of, because I just moved to Missouri, so what I was worried about was being in a low point and being flooded. So I bought a house on a hill. Well, that's great when it rains. It's not so good with ice. And I don't have the special MoDOT vehicle that gets you to drive in ice, so I had to buy some salt for my driveway. I paid $8 for a 40-pound bag. Four times what the Department of Transportation paid to clear the commute during that whole storm. In 2016, the entire winter maintenance budget was, the spending was $25 million. So per licensed driver, that was about $6. Per citizen, that was $4 for the whole winter. For those that would say that there are no economies of scale at the state level for the work that's done, for the logistical exercise that we go through, for the planning, for the labor, for the materials, I suggest they do not have the facts. Putting these things in context is vitally important. $6 for all of winter maintenance last year. It was a light winter, admittedly, but even in the heaviest of winters, probably less than $20 to the average driver. And what a service you get for that.
Yes, Pastor. I'm Bill Stratman from Washington, Missouri.
Welcome.
I think you came out to our transportation committee meeting, and
I did.
that's really great for our community. Invite Patrick to come out to your community and talk about what he's doing. That's a grassroots effort.
Great.
I don't want to take anything away from you, but
Thanks.
I'm also a Toyota dealer, okay? The federal mandates indicate by 2025, the estimated miles per gallon is over 50 miles per gallon.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 7-8 years from now.
Right.
The most fuel efficient car that I have on my lot gets just a little over 50, or right at 50. How's this going to work? I mean, somehow or another, the federal government is going to have to lower their EPA estimated, something's got to happen, because what's happening is the manufacturers are still trying to produce cars that are going to meet this at some point, or get close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, that's why they're all going electric. And since the gas is based, our funding is based on cents per gallon, it's going to come to a collision course.
Right.
Something's got to happen. I'm just curious what you
Well, it's a great point, but I think it's one of the elements, because there is no doubt about it. From a societal perspective, the rising fuel economy of our fleet is a good thing. Whether or not we can exercise it as rapidly as we'd like, I think is debatable. But the fact remains that for every mile driven, there is a declining value of the gas tax. There is no doubt about that. But that does not mean, and I think that has us bound up in avoiding one of the simplest things we can do in the short term. And quite frankly, when you know something like that's coming, why not harvest the gas tax while it's still available to us as a means to upgrade and really take care of our existing system and enable us. If we're investing properly right now, we'll be able to transition to the new economy, maybe it's an electric propulsion model, maybe not. But that remains to be seen. What we know right now is how much each penny generates in revenue and what we'll receive in revenue. It's easy to collect, it's inexpensive to do so, and it is a time-proven user fee for the use of our transportation network. The more you drive, the more you pay. And it's a very simple concept. We do need to transition from that, and there are efforts going on throughout the nation to do so. And in fact, in Missouri, we applied for and received a grant from Federal Highway, again, working with our great partners. I see Kevin Ward here from our division office, who's a wonderful partner for us in the state with MoDOT. We are really blessed to have him and his staff here working hard on our behalf. They granted us a kind of an experiment grant, small amount, $250,000, to investigate a fuel economy-based registration fee to provide essentially an offset to the declining value of the gas tax. Now, we'll have to work with legislators to be able to put this in place, and we'll have to work with the Department of Revenue to update their systems in order to do so. But what we're doing right now is putting together a plan to execute that and to apply for a greater grant. Most of the grant money that's available, it's $95 million nationwide over a 5-year period, was intended, I think, to study vehicle miles traveled as an alternative to the gas tax. There are 2 big blocks of states, both on the east and west coasts, that are investigating that. I think there's a simpler way forward, at least in the interim, which is to offset the fuel economy. So if I get 40 miles to the gallon and you get 20, and we drive the same amount of miles, I'm paying half. And so we just simply grab that fuel economy data and have a registration fee that offsets and pays the difference. It creates better equity than even our gas tax does now when you combine the two. So it's an idea that we're trying to work with our policymakers and flesh that out. But there are solutions that are being looked at. We will have to transition to them, but I really believe that over the next decade, the gas tax it's simple, it's easy, it's been done, and it's not politically popular, but no increase in fee is. When you look at the return that can come from the investments that we're talking about at a fairly marginal rate for the average family, it's, in my opinion, it's a policy slam dunk. Thank you. Great. Well, I appreciate everybody coming. It is such a benefit to us as a department to know that so many business leaders and others really care about this issue, and I appreciate deeply your assistance and your partnership. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you and to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks.